Hey, welcome back to another episode of Going Behind Barcelona's startup scene. Today, I'm chatting with my friend Sergio Gago. He's a really interesting character because he spent his 20-year career deep diving in the world of technology and being a CTO. So he's going to share his ideas and thoughts on how to become a CTO, a Chief Technical Officer. Is every coder meant to be one? And how you can actually study to be one. So stick around to the end. We'll also release this as a podcast if you want to listen to that too. Enjoy. Which is that managing tech, CTOs are highly skilled and very integral functions to successful technology companies, because you can't have a technology company without a technology team, right? You've got a lot of experience in that because when you were 17 to 19 years old, you started, what was the agency called?
It was called Abicom.
Abicom. Where was the name from?
I don't even remember. We called it Abicom Group.
Flip the coin. It's Abicom, guys.
and we said it Group because it looked like we were bigger.
It's a smart tactic.
Yeah, but it was stupid. And then we changed it to RS Development.
As
in the God of War.
Oh, I love that, RS Development. Okay, so obviously maybe building products for the army, I don't know. But so you earn your stripes, right? So that was very important for you at that age and that time to understand, and it's amazing you had that lesson. You've been involved in a lot of different things, my man. So what I want to ask you is, you've been a CTO, you've been a developer, you're now an exited founder working in a corporate, again, going full circuit. What are the most important skills to be a good developer and a CTO?
Well, those two are contradictory.
Okay.
I do believe that you can be a very good developer and a very good CTO at the same time. I think you can be a skilled programmer. I still do some coding when I can. But the CTO skill set is completely different.
I love that.
It's in fact opposite to it. And whenever I give trainings or speak with my team, new tech managers, for example, who have been upgraded into the ranks of management or coming from other places, the very first thing I tell them is that this is not a vertical change. It's not a vertical promotion as when you're a junior developer and become a mid-level or senior developer. It's a horizontal one. And it requires a completely different set of skills. And yes, you do need to understand technology. You need to be in there because that's the only way to create rapport with your team and really understand and make the smart decisions or help your team make smart decisions. But it's not about technology anymore. In fact, I think that the most complicated thing to understand for new CTOs is that your team is the other C-level executives, as well as your technologist. And it's really difficult for people to make that click.
So it's a mind change, an understanding change to go. The second you become a CTO, you're no longer, you're not just the chief technical officer managing your tech team that you used to work with because you've been, promoted from that core tech team, from a senior manager or whatever developer to that role. Now you're actually managing your other executives.
Exactly.
As well as the tech team, or actually specifically
as well.
Yeah.
I mean, you are at the end of the day the main responsible for the technology and sometimes the product of the company. So you need to have a good layer of mid-management to really help you with the ones who are in the trenches of coding. Name it a VP of engineering or directors of engineering. It doesn't matter how you organize your team. But you're not going to be doing daily stand-ups or doing sprint plans or being in incidents, doing fixing things at 4 a.m. You're not going to be there. You're going to be explaining it to the board what happened and what impact did it have and how you're going to do it to change it. You're going to be dealing with a partner who will require a deeper level of investment or selling the company. And that requires a different level of skills and different level of focus. So developers, when we are coding, we are focused people, right? Narrow vision, so you can be in the zone, right? Put your headphones on and solve an extremely complex problem. Maybe in a team, maybe longer or shorter, but it's very difficult problems that requires a lot of your focus and go and do it. But a management position is the opposite thing. You need a super big picture and need to see all the moving pieces and the different pieces of the puzzle that you need to fit together. So what you see in pretty much almost all startups that became scale-ups, right? And the startup who was co-founded with a CTO. We call it a CTO, but it was really the programmer or co-founder who coded everything by himself, and then got one more person and then another one, and the team was 4, 5, 6, maybe 10 people. And then this person started to struggle a little bit because, well, it's the machine is his baby. He or her is going to be extremely invested. And this person is the perfect tech person to really create the MVP, create the product, and have the vision of what the problem was being solved. But when you're a scale-up and you're passing the 20, 25, 30 developers, or it doesn't matter, maybe it's marketing people, finance, sales, it affects
team is a large number now.
So suddenly the worries that you have in the back of your brain are completely different, and it's extremely difficult to let go. So you have companies that try to provide training for their technical co-founder.
And this is the ones when they vertically grow, right? So like this is the ones, so for example, you have a co-founder, you know, the example you gave, those guys who came to you for the fintech company, right? They had no technical capability, right? So say example they did, right? So it was 3 finance guys and 2 technical guys that built the early product and developed it, right? Sorry, there's the church bells from Barcelona again, guys. That's the reality of where we're filming right now, coming at you live from Barcelona, the beautiful backdrop of the city itself. Oh, and they ring so much, but hey, we'll let it happen. So my point being, you have 2 technical guys or girls in that as well. We need more of that. They 5 years down the line, right? Now you mentioned they're getting training. Like, hey, the team's now 50 people. You raised $5 million. You know, you need to. One of them gets put into the CTO role. They've been there the whole time. That's the point you're making right now. So, can you train a technical co-founder to be a CTO?
Can it be done? Yes. Mm-hmm. The question is not whether the skills can be transferred or there is education for that, and we've had MBAs and programs like that for a long time. The question is whether that person is really willing to do it. If you ask a random developer from anywhere in the world, you have only about 20% chances that this engineer wants to go into management. You have a lot of engineers who went into a mid-management level, an engineer manager or a technical lead, so the amount of meetings and involvement and how far from the code would take them, and said, look, I'm super happy just in the trenches of coding. And if you added that nowadays, and since several years ago, engineers can really grow vertically in the pure technical branch, not in all companies, but in many. So in the past, you had a ceiling. If you wanted to make more money, you had to go into management. Now that's not true anymore. So developers don't have to leave the coding thing or the architecture or the staff engineering thing in order to grow in the ranks. So they don't have to. So the key question is whether they want or not. And in many cases is that they don't want. We push them, the CEOs push them, the board pushes them, and that never works. Because if someone doesn't really want to deal with people, there is no training you can do, period. It doesn't matter the nationality, the age, or anything like that. When you're older, you're more mature, you're better suited to say no, right, and have different opportunities.
So what makes a good CTO?
So a CTO is...
the skills, like the top 5 skills that you would need to be a good CTO?
I think it's really one skill.
Okay.
But it's being a jack of all trades. That's the one thing, because you do need to understand quickly many things at the same time. Do you need to understand a P&L, a balance sheet, and all the financial jargon that will be flying around? Yeah. Absolutely, yes. You don't have to be an accountant. You don't have to be a financier and be able to negotiate the debt and equity and all that. But you need to know what CAPEX means and how that involves your team. You need to know what COGS means and what's the difference between your colo infrastructure and your cloud infrastructure, and what this means, what's the impact of activating a piece of software or not, and how you capitalize that. So there's a lot of financial jargon that you need to understand. You don't need to understand your developers working on a new cutting-edge language that was not even there when you were coding yourself, but you need to know what is the overall long-term goal of the infrastructure. You do not need to be a marketeer. You don't need to know how you're acquiring customers and what's your marketing mix and how you can deal with the next big campaign for Black Friday. But you need to really understand what's going on in the marketing brain. You need to know about product. You need to know about, and you need to understand your CEO, because that's the only way that you can help him or her, and vice versa. Mm-hmm. And most importantly, you need to understand what's in the minds of your board, whether it's the investors, private investment families, or anything like that, and understand what's the long-term strategy of your company. Are we going for a sale? Then what is the best strategy for the technology side?
And how build IP in that tech team, in the tech product maybe, because otherwise it could be an acqui-hire. The difference between acquiring a company for its technology to swallow that in versus acquiring a company for its technical team are two very different things.
Yeah. Exactly that. So it's a lot of long-term vision and strategic vision that you have to transfer from your typical full focus vision on coding. Because what you want to do as a developer is build something cool, right? And that's why I became a software developer at the beginning, because it gave me clay to build anything I wanted, and that was beautiful. And then years ago, someone said, "Well, you actually have the best of both worlds, because you can imagine, you can have a little bit of a business mind and picture a business that you want to create, and then you can go and build it yourself. Anybody else, the rest of them as mortals, need to raise capital or pay a CTO to do it." But over time, I realized that that's not entirely true, because at the end of the day, you can focus on one thing at a time. And even if I can put on the business hat, and now I'm taking more a general manager type of role, I cannot think anymore as a CTO. It's like, ketchup and catsup. You can do either one, but you cannot say both at the same time. Even if you are a jack of all trades, you still need peers to work with. So a lot of CTOs think about the rest of the C executives and the board as the enemies, as the ones who are always pushing things from a client or new features
and everything.
And I don't have budget, I need to hire people. And that is not the right way. You are one C in the table as well, and they are your team. Same as you have Scrum teams that are super tight and work together great, and they help each other and they have their Scrum meetings. The board or the executive committee is another team as well. So when you imagine your typical stages of team formation, right? The forming, storming, norming, and performing, that also happens with C-level executives. You join a new team, especially in scale-ups or bigger startups that have some traction already. The first thing you're going to have is clash, right? And identify what are the things, the storming. But then you identify what are the things that make the other people click, and where they can help you, where you can help them, and all that type of thing.
But I actually want to make a point about that. That's a team formation process. I forget who defined it, and it's where you form a team, the forming process, like, hey, Sergio, Matt, you're together, technical guy, finance guy, operations guy, management guy, and you go, hey, so now the storming is when you start to maybe it'll have a bit of friction, because you realize I'm an alpha and you're an alpha, and we both want to lead, or we have different views and opinions of the creative process or the development process, right? That's the storming process. Then there's the norming, where we normalize things. We realize, hold on a minute, you can help me here and I can help you there, and we sort of make sense of each other and the team's dynamics. And then the last point, we perform. That's the example you just given there. I want to ask you a question, which I know many of you watching this right now, listening to this as well, because this is also a podcast. If you're watching this, you can listen to this too. And vice versa. If you're listening to this, you can watch it to see our beautiful faces and the bells of Barcelona. If you were starting out today, 20 years ago, almost 18 years ago, you started out as a 17, 19-year-old creating your first software development house, right? Outsourced agency. If you were starting today and you were a young aspiring CTO, you were like, I want to be a chief technical officer of a tech company or a big tech conglomerate, right? What would you do? What steps would you take?
Well, I think the first thing is to start coding. You do need to understand development. And they say the devil knows more because of devil than because of being old, or how you say that in English. So you do need, I do believe CTOs need to have a technical background. And then you need to find your space in there. But once you're there, you have to pick from all the different parts of a company. So I became a project manager. Kind of serendipity, but I had a gig about a project manager, and that helped me really be everywhere and nowhere at the same time, and see all the the struggles and limitations and resource struggles that you have. So you have to be in different places, different industries, if you can, different types of companies, startups, corporates, so that you amass a big amount of context. If possible, in different countries as well, because in Spain we do things one way, in France they do things in a different way, in the States it's in a different way. So you try to pick the right thing. And then I truly believe in education. There are some things that you need people in specific environments to learn from, whether it's case studies or just going about with other CTOs. And that's the other thing that Barcelona has. There's a really good community of CXOs. So the CEOs would get together and discuss in private what happens and how they solved this thing or that thing. And
CXOs?
I mean, for any C-level.
Okay.
Yeah, so for CTOs, it's the same thing. There are communities where we learn from each other and share experiences and leverage that community and people from everywhere as well. That's the other beautiful thing of Barcelona. So it's a lot about networking, about education, and about being open-minded and taking the opportunities. So what we're trying to do, and now there's a few people trying to create specific education for CTOs. Big companies would always go for the MBA hat, right? And that's what I did. I studied an MBA several years ago.
Do you think it's worth it to do an MBA if you want to become a CTO?
That's a tough question. It was worth for me, but that doesn't have to be the case for everybody.
It's case by case, right?
I was the only tech guy and the only entrepreneur in my class. Everyone was McKinsey's, Price, EY, that type of profiles. And that was great. I learned a shit ton of things from them, exactly what I wanted, because I wanted to close the circle on the skills that I was missing, whether it was finance, go-to-market strategies, corporate entrepreneurship, which is very different than traditional ground roots entrepreneurship. So a lot of those things really helped me see the world from a different angle and see cases and discuss about cases that otherwise you couldn't grasp. I mean, how often do you go out and about and discuss the Ryanair last movement on petrol negotiation? And with whom you speak about that? That's not a beer conversation that you typically find. And neither as a CTO. Because when you speak with other tech people, you're going to be talking about Kubernetes and stuff like that, or Golang or Scala. And you need to expand those conversations to really understand what some people call the golf course conversations. And it's not that I golf, but in the C-level and in corporate, those are the conversations that you're going to have and the things that you will need to understand. So once you get into that group, you kind of poison your mind a little bit and you get further away from technology. So you need to be careful to keep a finger or two or three in the tech side and make sure that you don't become a suit and tie CIO who doesn't understand technology, because then you lose the rapport with your tech team. Yeah. That balance is the most important thing, I believe, to keep for a CTO.
So just to round things off as well, so Sergio, you've spoken about so many different things in terms of what's the right role or what's the right person for a CTO role, right? And it's a jack of all trades. To our audience, who are many of which might be aspiring CTOs and things like that, what programs can you take to become a CTO?
Right. So the first obvious choice for any executive person is the MBA, right? And it has its pros and cons. It's expensive and maybe it's not tailor-made for the likes of us technologists.
Are there none today that, obviously the cliche ones, obviously here in Barcelona you have very good school. What's it called again? What's the big MBA school here again called?
ESADE.
Thank you, ESADE. And obviously in Paris you have INSEAD, and in London you have London Business School, Harvard, all those ones, right? But is there any one that's focused towards real executives of technology companies, which are the biggest companies today? Not yet.
Not yet. And here's the thing: for a long time, people thought that technology was a commodity, and that might have been true in the past. But nowadays, technology is one of the most important seats in specific type of companies, in a fintech company, if you will. So I just got from some auditors that are working with a client of mine, one request. When they audit a purchase after an M&A deal, or something like that.
The company's being bought, a merger and acquisition.
And one of the requests, really smart people, really smart MBAs, bright guys. One of their questions was, how many lines of code did you write this year? And I was embarrassed by that ask. And it's okay. That's something that they've been asking for a long time.
What are they trying to achieve from that?
Put a valuation on the asset. And that's a standard thing that pretty much all auditing companies, it doesn't matter the name, all of them do it. They evaluate the price or the value of an asset, of a software asset, based on lines of code. And then to evaluate how much you can capitalize, then you separate lines of code written for a client and lines of code written for new features.
But surely the smarter and better developer you are, the less lines of code. I mean, be honest with me, is that how it works?
Exactly. That's a crappy metric. That doesn't...
So actually one line. And what? So is one line worth 1 billion and 100 lines worth 1 million? I mean, what is it? Is that what they were trying to get to?
Exactly. So my point is, in the 80s, lines of code was an actual KPI that people use in consulting companies. You would sell lines of code by thousands and charge customers by that metric. And then quickly developers realized that, you can actually write the same thing with twice the code, right? And that doesn't make the code any better, but still. And do comments count as lines of code? And if I put everything on the same line, I'm going to get paid more or less. So it's something that doesn't make sense, not today, nor 10 or 15 years ago. So it's something from the 70s.
So it just shows executives today's lack of understanding.
Exactly. And the reason for that is that because technology was a commodity. It was something that the developers, the technologists would do hidden in the dungeon, and 6 months later will come out with the solution to solve the problem. And then someone else who was able to deal with people would go out and about to sell it. But that's not the case anymore, because in any company that's based on technology, whether it is some digital company or a startup that's based on disrupting whichever industry you can think of, technology is the core element of that. And once the technology is well established, then you can go out and sell it. But you don't sell anything. You sell something that you can maintain and that can scale, right? Otherwise, you become a consulting company or a mom and pop shop, which is also fine, but not exactly what we...
It's a lifestyle business,
to achieve here. So when you're doing traditional education, you can think about computer science as your research element of, thinking about information theory or about solving business problems. But that's it. Technology is just one row in your P&L, and that's all you want. Either put some valuation on the asset or anything else. So from an MBA, you don't really get the technology perspective. So what we're trying to do, and now you're seeing new developments on that, on creating executive education for those profiles we were talking about before, either technical co-founders, engineers, developers who are bright at doing what they're doing, but who really want to take the leap, go to the next step, or the leap of faith, if you will. Then it feels like that sometimes. But programs that are focused on those skills. You don't need to teach someone to code. They know how to do that already. In fact, you need to unteach them how to code and see things from the other side. So we're building a kind of executive program for CTOs.
Which universities was that?
With the Barcelona Technology School.
Barcelona Technology School program for CTOs, future CTOs. Yeah. How long is the program?
It's 1 year. It's an executive program for 1 year, like EMBAs and things.
What do you have to qualify for the program?
Well, you need to be a technologist and you need to have an interest. You don't have to be an engineer manager or a developer, but need to have some understanding of the tech inside and some jurisdiction.
How many, because also this is an interesting one, because obviously now technology and coding specifically, some of the best developers in the world are self-taught, right? Never educated, they are self-taught, right? And obviously also some of the best are also taught by Stanford, right? So there's a divide in the industry, I think, a bit of a trade-off, right? Those that are taught, those that are self-taught. So this, for example, now education, we've proven by you giving the examples that education and MBAs specifically are failing businesses of today because they're not implementing a module on understanding how tech teams operate, how innovation operates, operates, right? There may be innovation processes, but maybe not so much what you're giving the examples of understanding how to push and how to pull a tech team for your advantage, right? Incorporate in that C-level conversation.
Especially when you grow your company, when you become a scale-up or even bigger positions.
So we've proven that education isn't the solution, but now you're implementing education as a solution, right? So my question is, long way to ask it, traditionally, for me, when I did my master's, I had to have at least 3 years, business experience. I had to come from an educational background or with a certain degree level, right? How do you qualify that someone is worthy of your course when actually they can be self-taught?
Well, I don't think education is the only way to get there. It is just one way. And then there's definitely many ways of becoming a CTO with my master, our masters, or someone else's. I didn't do any technical master to become a CTO. I think it just compiles experience from many people, so you get there in a straighter line instead of what most of us did, which was hitting the wall many times and whatnot. I've been hiring developers for years without even caring their education levels. For me, as if you study computer science or industrial engineering or physics or chemistry or literature, that gave me an idea of the things you went through, but not to what extent you use that. You could have gone through engineering school, your 5 years or 4 years or 8 years, and not learned a thing. Or you could have self-taught yourself and be a kick-ass developer. So it's really about the attitudes that you get and the aptitudes that you show on that side. Now, if you pass through some courses and through some education, you definitely have the chance to learn that. Whether you took it or not, that's a different question. I remember when I was at college, I failed miserably many of the subjects, but I was the only one who understood and knew how to build a local area network in my class. And I did telecommunications engineering. So my colleagues, my classmates were passing the exams with flying colors. I was failing because I was busy learning how this new Bluetooth thing was being used for hacking, for blue hacking. And they passed the exam and I failed miserably.
Yeah, you're the one with the most valuable skill set.
And then the next day, a friend of mine, my father's company, they need to install the LAN for their company. Maybe you can help us. Like, what the fuck? I failed the exam. Do it yourself. That you got an A. Yeah. So it really depends on what you take from it and how then you ruminate those skills or that knowledge. University, especially in Spain, does need a revamp, I believe. We had, back in my university, we had an amazing program that was teachers from companies. And it was a special program for a side subject, optative or optional subjects. So they didn't count for your global credits, meaning that those were things that you would only do if you had free time. But some teachers came from the biggest consulting companies or coolest tech companies back then in Spain. And we had teachers who were involved in multi-million software projects that were telling us, showing us how they did their work. So from about 200 people that were in my class, together with the computer scientist, there was only 2 people attending that optional course. My partner from our first company and myself. And then thanks to that, we got our first clients because we learned a shit ton of things thanks to those guys. That was the very first time. One of these professors who was an engineer manager for one of the leading companies from Telefonica R&D. So he came one day and said, look, we have this in the office that just came. It's something that they came out with from the United States. And we're now thinking about what it could be useful for. And it was called Agile Methods and Extreme Programming, before anybody was implementing or doing anything with that. So that was amazing. Then, of course, 1 hour later, we had to go for calculus and physics 1 and physics 2 and electronics and all these kind of things. But the fact that most of my classmates didn't even think about taking that class, that was the class that really mattered, and one of the classes that helped me the most in my professional career, that made me think that the university education, as we know of today, can be good for research and for certain type of jobs, but definitely not for what the industry needs on that side.
Sergio, What is the word you would describe? Sorry, start again. So take two. Here we go, guys. See, I'm not even perfect every single time. Sergio, if you had to describe Barcelona's startup ecosystem in one word, what would it be?
That's a tough one. I would say Barcelona. Well, let me explain. At the end of the day is what do you want to make out of it? And what comes to mind when anywhere you're from, what comes to mind when you hear the word Barcelona? And it's probably all of those things. As the beach, as the mountain, as the vibrant ecosystem. So it's what do you want to make it of it? Barcelona would be my answer.
Yeah.
Well, I really had a lot of fun speaking with Matt today and talking about the Barcelona ecosystem. I hope you liked it as well. So if you liked as much as I did, just click the like and subscribe to the channel, as I will do once I get home.
Thank you so much. Cheers, Sergio. My man, appreciate it. And then, okay, anything else you want to say or finish up with? I want to ask you one question, actually, just because while I have you, and we finish up now because this has gone on way too long, but it's so golden. Just quick one is, and we can do short answer. Yeah. What is the most important, what is the most important skill in technology today? In tech teams and entrepreneurship and startups, what is the most important skill that you need to have in a tech team as a developer or a CTO?
Communication. By far, well, I would argue that in any professional role, but in the world we live in today, where a lot of the things will be soon automated, and we will need to really use our smarts to go to the next thing or go to the next level. We need to work together, work smarter together, and communicate in a way that we could have done before.
So communication is a key, no surprise there, but also something that I think is often forgotten, right? Because communication is key. And like you mentioned, interestingly, back to your point about the golden rule of, or the golden skill set of the dream CTO is someone who is a jack of all trades, right? You have a good understanding of your domain, which is technology. You're a coder by trade, but you've also unlearned your coding skills a little bit to understand how to manage people, right? And to communicate. So ultimately, the greatest leader in a technical role is someone who's a jack of all trades, can communicate, and can manage the stakeholders. Because at the C level, you're managing a CEO, you're managing a chief marketing officer, CMO, and you name it, all the other levels, as well as the board. And you're describing to them how the processes of your development will implement the business from a marketing, from a financial perspective, and you name it, right? So Sergio Gago, thank you so much for joining us, mate, on behind the startup scenes here in Barcelona with the church bells interrupting us throughout the process. Thank you so much. Cheers, buddy.
Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you. And hey, I'll see you in the next video.